Hi, in this video demonstration we're going to take a look at a specific kind of shader that will allow us to do several different things that may become very useful in the future. This particular shader is called the Matte Shadow Reflection shader, and it will allow us to do things like create an endless horizon background for our product shots, and some other things in the future will also allow us to composite our, say, 3D animations and 3D scenes, or even just 3D objects, directly into a live photograph or live footage, so that later on you can put your animated characters and stuff like that into live footage and kind of combine them right here in 3D Studio. In order to show you this, I'm going to go ahead and create our good old standby, the teapot. Get my move tool, we'll kind of center that teapot to the grid. Move over to the Modify tab. Let's go ahead and round them out to about 40 radius and 12 segments to smooth that teapot out here. I need to make sure that I'm set up with my mental ray kind of basic settings here for this to work, because this is a mental ray shader. And I'm going to hit the Shift F on my keyboard in order to turn on my safe frames here. In the past, when we were talking about things like HDRI lighting, I went ahead and I created a plane here. I'm going to create one, although I'm going to make it a little bit smaller this time, maybe only 500 by 500, because what we're going to do is trick 3D Studio into believing that this kind of goes on forever and we never ever see an edge to this horizon. So all we need this plane to be is big enough for all the shadows. And I also only want about one length and one segment in there as well, and then I can kind of right click down here to zero out that plane. Again, all things we've done in the past. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on my teapot a little bit here. Might even go ahead and make a camera. And if I go ahead and do a render right now, right, we've got this terrible black background with my awful green plane and my horribly pink teapot up here. Let me go ahead and make that image a little smaller so it renders a little faster as we continue on here. Let's jump into the material editors now, and let's create at least a quick one for our teapot. Let's go with a dusty kind of blue teapot here for this one. Go ahead and add that to my teapot there, and maybe 120 by 90 is kind of a good shiny ceramic for that teapot. And then in the future, you know, I probably use my HDR images or spherical images to create a nice reflection or something along those lines for this to work out really nicely. In fact, we can just go ahead and we'll just go ahead and cheat. Let's leave that for later. Actually, let's continue on here. In the second shader here that we're going to use for our plane, this is where we're going to load the matte shadow and reflection. Now, if I hit 8 on my keyboard, I'll bring up the environment and effects panel. And these two colors, this one and the one for our plane, are going to need to match pretty perfectly for this to work. So I'm going to leave my environment effects and my material editor open here at the same time so that I can kind of work with them together here. Instead of using the good old standard shader here, we're going to go ahead and on our secondary sub-object or sample slot here, we're going to hit that standard button to change this shader from what it started as to one underneath our mental ray shaders. And we'll find that matte / shadow / reflection shader. Go ahead and select it and hit OK. You can scroll through and check out all of these settings. There are quite a few that do some various different things for us, including create reflections and things along those lines, which we'll play with a little bit here coming up. But what we want to do for right now is just take a look at these first few settings here, the matte shadow reflection parameters. To create an endless horizon, it's very, very, very simple. All we have to do is make the camera matte background match the actual background here. So if I go ahead and let's make this a very light gray. It doesn't matter, you know, one versus the other, because I can right click on this and select copy from that color swatch. Then come right over here to my environment and over the background color, right click and paste. If I assign this directly to my plane, it'll look like it just turned that kind of flat gray here. But when I render, that line is completely vanished. Now it looks like my teapot's floating out here in gray space because it's gotten rid of all of these extra little bits of detail. That same color on a standard texture here, regardless of how well those match, would leave us with an icky, nasty horizon line here. So let's go ahead and put a light in the scene here. Let's go down to our standard lights. Mental Ray Omni is a good one for this. And let's just kind of pull this back, maybe down to light our teapot up here. And what I'm looking for is shadow placement almost above everything else. If I stretch my shadows until they fall off the edge of my scene, of my actual plane, that will create a horizon line. So what I want is I want this plane to be just big enough to house the shadows that I really want in this. And the higher I raise this, and maybe kind of move it in here a little bit, we get some shadows, but they don't ever fall off the edge anywhere on our scene here. If I go ahead and render this with our horizon, right, we see this kind of very dark shadow. So we can go to our Modify tab here, and under the area light parameters, we can bump that up maybe to about 20 all the way around. Increase the samples to get the speckleness of our shadows to be a little bit smoother. And the higher that radius goes, of course, we get a softer shadow down here. We can further create some more realistic light by adding a skylight to our scene. So if I click that, and then in my top view, doesn't matter where, anywhere, add that skylight, and maybe only give it at about 0.5 multiplier. And that'll kind of soften those dark, harsh edges out all over the place, as well as kind of lighten up our shadows for a little bit more realistic view here. But again, we've got that standard shader now shown, so we still get something, even with good lighting, of that horizon. With our matte shadow reflection texture, it gets rid of that for us. In fact, the only thing it leaves are shadows, and then it just fills in the rest with that background color. So that's all of our matte shadow reflection is going to leave shadows, or it can also use use reflections. So we've got some shadow parameters down here, as well as our ambient shadows and shadow casting lights we can add in, but that's really kind of unnecessary at this point. We've got some samples, or some ambient occlusion samples, because this shader does work with ambient occlusion, which we'll talk about in the future. We've also got the ability to turn on reflections here, and how many samples in this glossiness parameter are going to be how reflective it is. It gives you kind of a hint here. 0 is a mirror shine. Right now it's defaulted at 8. Let's just kind of see what happens. We actually get some reflective qualities using this matte shadow reflection shader, as well as our shadows. And then in the background we would have nothing but that other. So the larger this number gets, the closer it is. We've also got some maximum distance. We'll leave that at about 8 for right now. Maximum distance, 0 means it's going to go on forever, and then the fall off here. But if we choose, let's say, 5 for our maximum distance, then our reflections will actually fade over time, and we'll get a stronger reflection towards the beginning, and then it'll kind of fade out. So you can use this to kind of help you get a more realistic effect in that case as well. I may have given a little too low of a reflection here, because we're not seeing much of anything. Let's bump that up to about 25. And now we're starting to see some of that blue, but it fades off real quickly. So we just get kind of a hint of a reflection down there. And that is how we would use our matte shadow reflection shader to create an endless horizon. This is great for things that, a little bit more like product shots, where maybe we would want to do just a cell phone or a can of soda, or a beer commercial or an alcohol commercial, where we want this thing to be the focus of our shot for a magazine ad or something, and then it just kind of disappears off into nothing, like Guinness here is the only thing in our world. All right, there we have it. A little bit of reflection, a little bit of shadow, no horizon line whatsoever. This works really great in combination with, let's say, our HDRI lighting, stuff like that. We can actually go ahead and load up in a reflection here. And maybe we can do our, there's our kitchen. We can just use that one here again. Maybe drop that reflectivity down to about 20. Copy this over so we can check out our settings, spherical environment good. And then maybe put this into our skylight as well, kind of carrying over from the earlier HDRI lighting. And now we've got a rather photorealistic rendering that no horizon, endless, goes on forever with a little bit of a reflectivity and shadow, and that's it. All right. use it well.